Thank you very much. We gather here today, of course, we've had a series of discussions across the continent, and more will be happening. Consider this session a thought leadership series where we as East African journalists can actually contribute to the discourse that is taking place across Africa, talking about what's the future of media. And this question is very pertinent at this point in time, especially because of this COVID-19 crisis, and in the way we report, in the way we relay information, and in the way we actually do our work. So I think mine as a moderator is just really to spark the discussion, to have us all going. And of course, at the end of it all is to make sure that we actually come in with a call to action and something that we can actually use and present, of course, to our host today for the future of reporting on the great story of development in Africa. So just to give you an update, we just have a few minutes to run on this. You all have the program. We request you to please keep to your time, especially the speakers as well. Should you have any questions, any contributions to make, kindly just check out on our chat box. And you can actually even just send in your questions even beforehand, and we'll be sure to actually sample them as well. So we are looking at communications in Africa in the time of COVID-19 and experiences from media in East Africa. That's our topic. We want to, of course, sustain the conversation online. The hashtag we'll be running is the Africa We Want and Africa Narrative. So the hashtags today we're running is the Africa We Want and the Africa Narrative. So remember, should you be tuning in through the live stream or through via Zoom, so please send in your questions. Of course, we'll be sure to sample them up as we go along. So here goes. And of course, I just want to quickly mention, of course, it's an honor and pleasure to see Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, who's the CEO of Auda Nepad. Thank you so much, sir, for your great leadership and the great team that is behind you. And to see you creating time to be with us here today, it's an honor and a pleasure. So karibu sana, as we'll say it in Swahili in Kenya. I also want to recognize and welcome Leslie Lee Kasumba, who's going to be our keynote address speaker. She's a broadcast media executive. Thank you, Lee, for being with us. I want to recognize and welcome Martin Boiler, who's the head of industrialization at Auda Nepad, the head of programs as well. I also want to recognize and welcome Julius Bizimungu, who's from New Times Media, that's from Rwanda. And I also want to welcome Madam Angel Navuri, who's from The Guardian in Tanzania. I also want to welcome as well Grace Musimami, who's the president of the Africa Agriculture Journalists Network, an initiative that is going to tell us more about, which I think is the way to go in terms of how journalists can be together and work together in unison. And of course, right here at home, I want to welcome Pauline Joroge, who's also from APRM, that's Nepad in Kenya, Karibu Pauline, and also Denise Mbabazi from Rwanda. Thank you all to our speakers for being here and being right on time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please allow me now to welcome our CEO, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, to set the stage and set the scene from that top level, you know, from where he sits, of course, sees the continent from a big picture perspective. I know we've been trying to break it down, West Africa, East Africa, to see the perspectives, but it will be interesting to see, of course, personally, I know I'm very passionate about the PIDA communication for that matter, which is something I know that you're also very passionate about. So from where you sit, sir, where are we headed as a media in this region?
Thank you very much, Mr. Laban, Cliff Onsario, and welcome to you all to this interaction. The main reason we are organizing as Auda Nepad these interactions with media region by region. We went to West Africa, then North Africa, now East Africa, and we'll move to Central and Southern Africa. The main reason is that we want to listen to the media actors on how they perceive, how they analyze, and how they talk generally about the crisis we are in. And that reason is based on the following rationale. Expertise in itself has seen its limits in many domains. You see epidemiologists fighting, quote unquote, between themselves on analytical tools. You see doctors not agreeing on therapies. You hear specialists talking about a vaccine against the COVID in the next 18 months, and other specialists saying that we will not get a vaccine before 3 to 4 years. So we are in a very special period where there are limitations of expertise, high level of confusions. When these moments happen, the most important quality that we should have as a development agency, as the development agency of the African Union, is to listen. But to listen in a generative way, to listen in order to generate ideas, in order to generate proposals, solutions, ways of thinking. So that's the main reason we organize these interactions. And I would like to thank you all for being present and allowing us, because what you will do is allow us to be a little bit more intelligent than we think we are. So listening, but listening with humility. The second point I would like to allude to is the narrative. Most of the narrative regarding this particular period in the continent, the narrative is built outside of Africa. Or when we talk about the African experiences that we are going through during this special period, we always refer to external actors and external regions. And I think that we should try to build our own narrative, because by building our own narrative, it allows us to communicate better with our own stakeholders, local communities, vulnerable people, marginalized segments of a society, fragilized youth because of the increase of unemployment. Why is it important to build our own narrative? Because the next years, 21, 22, 23, will be difficult years for Africa. And we know why, and Martin will talk about it later. We know that our fiscal space is shrinking. We know that unemployment is increasing. We know that food insecurity is increasing. And in that global uncertainty, we are not sure yet of the consequences that the global turmoils will have as an impact on the continent. So if we do not track the conception of our arguments in order to build our narrative, we might be lost strategically. And my third point is about the unknown. You know, there is that expression today, which is very much used, which is called the new normal. We somehow knew what the normal was, but we hardly know what is the new normal. The degree of uncertainty and complexity of the new normal as a direct consequence on our way of thinking and communicating. Now, as supposed experts that we are, we reflect on energy, on transport, climate change, on food security, on unemployment, etc. And we try to devise solutions. But this crisis has impacted our systems in such a manner that we hardly know what the new normal will be. So it is extremely important that when we enter this new normal, we interact with critical actors like you, who are in constant interaction with what we call the populations. But these populations are organized. These communities are organized. These communities are directly facing severe constraints. So how do we apprehend, anticipate, and know more is extremely important if we want to enter with more serenity in what I call the new normal. And in this interaction, and I will close there, we fundamentally are in a listening position with humility in order to reflect better and to envisage better the difficult future in which we are going to enter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your remarks as well. Kind of just instigating and just kind of charting the way forward into how you see it from your side. And what I just pick up from your conversation in terms of, talking about that need for a high level of expertise in a very confused state of the world currently, kind of calling on to the owners of us journalists as well. And speaking on how, as African journalists, we also need to build a narrative. It will be also interesting to see when you mentioned about the next 2 years and how difficult that will be. And of course, the place that AUDA is going to assist journalists in terms of capacity building to help us. So thank you very much for your time, sir. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to welcome Mr. Mwangi Gakunga. I was, of course, informed that he was not going to be on the call on time, but I just want to confirm that if Mwangi is on the call now, has Mwangi joined us? I see we have, and thank you so much to the over 50 participants now that we currently have, 67 currently. Thank you so much for joining us. Just confirming that Mwangi is on the call.
He's not yet here.
Then in that view, thank you, Mwanja. Then in that view, I'm just going to ask Martin. Martin is going to just talk to us about the socioeconomic consequences of the crisis and how media could help in prevention and mitigation of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Martin, I know Dr. Mayaki mentioned that there's some insights you're going to share with us, in terms of just how the next 2 years perhaps might be a bit rough in terms of the physical space. So how do you see it from your side as well? Martin, if you could unmute your mic. Okay, Martin, just all right, there you go.
Okay, thank you.
There you go, yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody and good afternoon to the CEO. And indeed, the opening remarks of the CEO does present the scope of my presentation. I will be very brief within the 5 minutes that I'm allocated. But what has to be underlined is the point that the CEO has made, that this is not about us preaching to the media, but is about fostering that partnership that we should be having between the AUDA, NEPAD, and the media, because one of the key development resources that we have to harness is actually community responsibility, community awareness, community public opinion, and information that the community has and builds into that energy that makes the whole population part of the development equation. And we hope that in this conversation, which is not the last of its kind, that we can continue as a continent to harness that aspect of the development equation. So what I have here is specifically 3 points I wanted to raise. And as been said, not to preach to the media, but actually to build a conversation around which the CEO mentioned in terms of what are the messages, the information, the narrative going out there that is probably being helped by the advent of COVID in terms of surfacing those issues and how then we connect that to the development of the continent. So the first issue is actually about putting COVID into context, about that African narrative, because we need, in fact, as AUD and EPAD, as media, to place this advent of COVID within our circumstances. And that is important because as the CEO was saying that many times we are just peddling the information that is coming out there. But obviously, until and unless we place this within our values, within our culture, our traditions, then we will not be responding to the issue that we are faced with as Africa. So first bullet there, acknowledging that in fact, COVID-19 is both a healthcare issue, and as we know from other countries, the first response was very medical, very healthcare kind of thing. But very quickly, all the countries actually recognized that this was indeed, and just as much, a socio-economic crisis related to saving livelihoods. And that is important. It's not a by the way issue. It has to be built in what we say, how we say it, and indeed our intentions in responding to COVID-19. The second point is that, well as of course there is acknowledgement that the virus will stay much longer than we probably all felt in the beginning, but the most critical impact will be felt on the socio-economic front in terms of its effects on the consequences. And this is what the CEO, Dr. Mayak, was referring to in the beginning. We are doing a number of studies to actually be clear in terms of evidence as to what is going on in the immediate term, but also what are the implications on the medium to long term. And some of the things we are finding out is that in obvious cases, and many other studies have alluded to the fact that the GDP in almost all countries is going to go down, is going to be decreasing and be pushed by factors like reduction in economic output, which we know is happening for various reasons, increase in spending, and actually spending in many cases money that governments don't have, and leading into debt sometimes or other shrinking in the government fiscus, and that in itself is an issue. We also have recognized that there's
Hello, Martin, are you there?
It appears we have lost connection to Martin, so I propose that we just carry on, and we should move on to the next section. Laban, please.
Mwanja?
I'm right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. It's fine. Martin will come back anyway.
Sorry, I think the call dropped there. My apologies for that. And I'm back now. Just to confirm, just Mwanja, if I got you again, could you kindly proceed on to the panel now?
Yes, we can move on to the panel discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Very well. So in view of that, ladies and gentlemen, I just now want to invite the three panelists who are going to take us through this session. Allow me to recognize and welcome Mr. Julius Bizimungu and Ms. Angel Navuri and Grace Musimami. They have about 5 minutes each to kind of paint a deeper picture into how the crisis has affected reporting in their land. And also, first of all, just give an overview of how the pandemic has been in their countries, then of course, how that has impacted on their reporting, and basically what they actually see as the future going forward. So let's start from Julius, who could take the floor now.
Thank you, Mr. Labani. Well, the new coronavirus pandemic has increased demand for information, and much more than ever, people demand information in a faster and desperate way. And this is what tends to happen in times of crisis. People who are locked in their homes or those whose businesses have been closed down are eager to know when the pandemic will recede for them to go back to their normal life. So the media has therefore had to be more proactive in responding, especially when it comes to providing timely information, analyzing the trends in the spread of the virus globally, but even breaking down some of the complex things like flattening the curve, social distancing, all these things that might be quite complicated to ordinary people. So this has not been an easy job because the media, just like any other industry or any other business, has not been spared from the impact of the virus. We have to remember that the media is in business, yet publishing worldwide is rapidly losing advertising revenues as companies are bracing themselves for an economic downturn, threatening journalism globally. Journalists are beginning to get laid off or even forced to take cuts in salaries. And particularly the print media has struggled with, some suspending printing of newspapers because no one is there to buy them. And what that means is that advertising and job announcements have gone away and even revenues are shrinking. So the media houses here in Rwanda have lost, 70% of the advertising revenues because of the pandemic. Another key highlight we have seen here is that the new media, social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, have really fueled the proliferation of misinformation. We have seen in crisis that fake information tend to move faster than even correct information. I have previously written about how the global epidemic has turned into an epidemic. People have spread fake announcements and rumors that increase anxiety of the people and even emotional disruption. In March, for instance, someone here shared a message that Rwanda had recorded 10 new coronavirus cases at a time when the country had registered only one case. And the following month in April, another person shared what looked like an official statement saying that the country was conducting a countrywide testing and calling on people to go to their nearest stadiums to get tested. But all this was were fake news. So the media has been really challenged to be quicker, accurate, and less dramatic in terms of reporting, and even more than ever engage healthcare professionals, scientists, and experts who really understand the pandemic more than anyone else. So, in a nutshell, that is what is happening here.
Thank you, Julius. You mentioned quicker and, of course, less breaking it down, especially to the masses. And of course, that touches a bit on the digital disruption taking place and how, of course, journalists can leverage on this. Angel, how is it in Tanzania? You mentioned that perhaps there has been a bit of misinformation, if I may say, regarding the numbers and how that has been reported, how COVID has been reported there. How's that impact on your journalism as well? Over to you, Angel.
Yeah, thank you, Laban. Hi, everyone. It's good to be in this meeting today. So actually in Tanzania, I know you understand that we didn't have a lockdown here, and business was business as usual. And the ministry has been reporting on the numbers, or let's say on daily basis, or let's say after 2 weeks. But the thing that helped us here in Tanzania is because the government, it's like it had a campaign of using, let's say, home remedies. Yeah, when it comes to, let's say, they tell you, let's say, take tea with lemon or take tea with this. So they promoted mostly of the home remedies, and at the same time, what they were doing is just to take precautions, because the government was looking at a situation where majority of the people that let's say they are not employed, but they are working on part-time basis. So looking them down for a while is going to affect the people, at the same time affect the economy. So people who are going to work as usual, including the media, making sure that you take all precautions. It's only that some companies, they decided to close down. Some of them closed, let's say, temporarily. Others, they went for like 3 months closing. Others, they did like part-time. You go to job, let's say 1 week, another week, you get some rest. So the revenue for media dropped here in Tanzania, let's say by 58%. Having in mind that the government was the main spender, then we have the international organizations, of which they closed completely. And up to now, most of the international organizations have not resumed yet. If they have, maybe I can say 5% only, they have resumed. So getting data has not been that problem, because the ministry has been reporting, although people, they think that maybe in this case we have been hiding data, but has not been the case. For the journalists, going for the field, you go to the field, yes, to do some stories, but when you get there, you get some people, maybe they are not, they don't want to speak, or they are not ready to talk to you, and some of them are home. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, yesterday when I was talking to you, I told you that I did a report on the impact of the virus when it comes to the smallholder farmer. And I did that field work, and the results were the ones that I shared the report with you, that we had we had some of the areas that were affected is the shortage of inputs and access to extension services, increased production costs, we have increased in product prices, we have decrease of international markets. So, but so far in Tanzania, we have tried to manage the COVID, and right now we have very few cases, because we have the Tanzania Research Institute, which has a medicine now, in a way that we use it, that one, a local one, although our government bought another one from Madagascar, but we have the local one here. So we have been using it, and the media, it has been affected in terms of revenue, but very few media companies have survived. For example, The Guardian survived because we have other sister companies. So if the print goes down, we have other companies that have been supporting us so that we still be in the market.
Thank you very much, Angel. Just to pose a question, maybe somebody just asked here that it was perceived that Tanzania bought the concoction to save themselves from COVID-19 from Madagascar. Was it true or not? I'm not going to have you answer that, but of course, I'll just give you some bit of time at the, after Grace speaks. Then we can come back to the three of you to just give your responses. So, Grace, over to you to give how COVID has impacted on your reporting.
Thank you very much. My name is Grace Musimami again, and I'm happy to be part of this. For Uganda as a case, as you may realize, 88% of the media houses in Uganda are practically privately owned by different members, different politicians, practically. So this has been of great impact, especially on the reporting landscape in Uganda, where many journalists have been laid off. So due to the guidelines and the lockdown, many have lost out on jobs because the media houses have learned to operate with very few journalists. Uganda being a case where we've not had any death that has come out of COVID, we've had great challenge on the media convincing the people that really there is the COVID really exists. Actually now, the more we've grown, people have thought that the media has been given a lot of money to send out propaganda that COVID exists in Uganda, where it really does not. However, that being said, the new norm of social media has taken root, and we, for the first time in Uganda, we realized that the government, or the president in particular, was using social media as his feedback point. So many people had to go in for social media to communicate. He would actually come out open and say, we are using Twitter. The challenge comes when you want the rural areas to be able to access information. We've had media really struggling to reach the rural, and you'll find the rural is not getting, apart from the key policy issues that there's a lockdown, there's a curfew, they're not getting the ready information that would transform rural communities or change rural lifestyle and behavior change. And in one way or the other, there has been a gap between the rural and the urban in terms of media reporting. The newspapers have scaled down completely, and people are relying on rural radio stations now, which also have not been having a chance because of the lockdown was a cross-cutting issue. People would not come to the center to be able to collect information that would be disseminated. So social media became the route for reporting for the rural communities. And this gap has continued to grow because now all media houses are doing is go on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and pick information and then report to the report. So there is that gap that has been caused by the current COVID situation. We also have the issue about a social media tax that is taxed heavily, especially on people, for the youth who are using a lot of social media. So this has been an issue which our government did not foresee and try to put right. But generally, there has been great impact on the media. There is no facilitation by the media houses. Government has capitalized most media houses. There was a big budget, COVID budget, that was released, and most of these media houses were given a lot of money. So that alone sent very bad signals for people to believe, is this media houses pro-government? A lot of money was to sensitize people, but the advertorial is looked at as a way of trying to make that media house tune towards government situations. However, we've been trying to tell people that the new norm is to change lots of things in terms of social media, especially for the rural. For example, agriculture, we've been really telling the government that the only way to have extension, because extension workers can no longer communicate, and this is a media tool as well. So we tell them to adopt use of interactive technologies like use of video to communicate. Lots of YouTube people now are able to get news on YouTube and download videos for rural communities, and download news. And this is where everybody is heading. And that is the current landscape in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. So in view of just about the 2 minutes out the three of you have, ladies and gentlemen, we've had perspectives from Rwanda, Tanzania, and now Uganda. I just, you kind of gave the current situation. I'm just gonna give you about 30 seconds to either of you, of course, who would hit the unmute button first, to just say, if this is our now, this is the current now, we're saying there's a misinformation, you're saying, you know, perspectives about, you know, COVID-19, people don't quite understand deeply about it. You know, you mentioned about the drop in newspaper circulations. Actually, here in Kenya, I was speaking to one of the CEOs of the media houses, and what they're saying is that it was perceived that you could actually contract the virus, you know, from the newspaper, you know. So is it true or not? You know, what is the WHO saying regarding, you know, perhaps consumption of news, especially at this time, and how can we break it down? Grace mentions about the conversations with the rural media. What's the place of traditional media in this current pandemic, especially at the time when we're talking about social media? We talk about Facebook, Google. You can access your news on this platform, but at the same time, people are now listening more to radio, you know? So there's kind of a lot. I think it's a quagmire we're in as journalists. So I'm just gonna give it up to any one of the three journalists, Julius, Angel, Grace, who can hit the mute button first to just say, in just under 30 seconds, what do you see this will actually bring for the next coming years?
Well, let me go first. I think we have to understand that we're in the changing times. You know, that's a fact. The internet, the digital disruption has changed everything, from the way we do things, from the way we do business, to even communication. We have to embrace it. We don't have any other way around it. Now, with COVID-19, when we talk about how the new media has fueled the proliferation of misinformation, for instance, it shouldn't be that the new media is a problem, really, but how we sensitize people in terms of the way what they consume every day. For instance, how do you create awareness about what you know, telling people or encouraging people, for instance, to verify sources of the information before you grasp anything you find on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, or anywhere. So I think first we need to embrace the new media. There's no any other way around it. But we also have to believe that it is too early to make an assumption that the traditional media is going away. People still look at either newspapers or radios as credible sources of information, despite the fact that there's a whole lot of political influence that drive all this traditional media. Sometimes people still have hope and still rely on traditional media. So I think one way to look at it is first to embrace the new media. And when you look around, maybe before even think about what is it that we can do to address the challenges that come with the new media, I think we have to understand that there are media houses, publishing agencies that have already embraced social media and tapping into this to create content that people need. You have media houses that have specifically put up, set up or established multimedia departments that were not there before 5 or even 10 years ago. So I think the new media has, much as it has come with challenges, but we also see opportunities, and those that are quick enough to embrace these new communication tools are really seeing the benefits.
Thank you very much, Julius. Appreciate it. So we have kind of given a perspective of how it is now. Yeah. Sorry, Grace, you want to quickly comment on something?
Yeah. I just wanted to come in a little and say that for Uganda, this is our political year. So
yes.
Yeah, and then every rural media needs to be active, is always active at this point in time. But just to build, to copy what the CEO said, is we need to build our own narrative in order to see that we have our networks. The media networks have to grow, because this is the only way we can solve the issue of fake news. And they are also to build interactive models. Say we need to set up central information hubs where journalists from the rural and those from the central can easily interact and have accurate information being sharing. I think where we are going, the gameplay will change from it's my pitch, I have the best story, and then turn into how shareable can this story go beyond me. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Julius. I'll be very unfair to Angel if I don't get your perspective at this time, seeing that I opened it up at this panel session. So, Angel, any quick thoughts?
Actually, I was looking at the way my colleague was saying, the one from Rwanda, that it won't be easy for us to move from the tradition away, because like the social media is there, yes, it's there, but at the end of the day, in the morning, people will read the newspaper to confirm if what the social media has said is true. So the print, it has still to be there. For example, in my country, in Tanzania, we have the digital that has moved, and we are making money out of the digital, because, for example, like the Guardian, our revenue for e-paper, I'm sure you understand the e-paper, it has gone up, let's say by 85% from where it was. So it's something like it cannot go down currently, but at least it's there to stay. We have a long way to go, not like the other Western area. So the tradition one, it still remains, because of also the people in the rural, although you have internet, but not all of them are able to access internet all the time. So they have to get the newspaper to be there. And now Tanzania, we're going for election. So now our copies for circulation have gone up again by 85% to 90%. Is right now for circulation, it has gone down up to 50%. So I believe that the print media still hold.
Thank you, Angel. Really appreciate. Thank you so much for your interventions as well. Moving away from our journalists in this part of the world and just trying to speak about that and what the impact has been, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that, hey, as much as we talk about technology disruption, as much as we talk about, the impact of COVID-19, we still have other issues that we're dealing with. I see questions, of course, that are raised as well online, and this comes, I think, pasted with this conversation about, in Kenya, for instance, there's been issues about locust invasion, but we've ended up focusing a lot, perhaps, on COVID and forgotten about, what are we going to eat? So that's a conversation that we can go on with as we get to the tail end of this. But at this point in time, I just now want to bring our attention to our chief speaker for today. Our guest speaker is Madam Leslie Lee Kasumba. She speaks Africa, that's in Uganda. And she's kind of, I think her conversation as well will be seeing where we're coming from. So there's a crisis, there's a pandemic, there's issue about digital disruption, there's issue about consumption of traditional media, there's conversation about how the future would be. So I think, Madam Kasumba, you have the honest task of trying to bring us all together and just try to see how can we really reevaluate ourselves, reinvent ourselves as journalists to be at the cutting edge, or shall I say the front row seat, to ensure that we actually keep Africans informed. I should mention that Madam Kasumba is currently in Ghana. Of course, she comes from Uganda, and she'll tell us what she's doing in Ghana, and I hope she's loving it, western part of Africa.
Hi, Laban. Thank you so much for that introduction. Can you hear me, firstly? Is everything okay?
Loud and clear, loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you very much for this conversation, for the organizers for having me, be able to contribute, as well as the CEO. It's really been insightful, and to my colleagues from around East Africa and everybody who's joining us with regards to this conversation. So as mentioned, my name is Lee Kasumba. I am Ugandan. The name Kasumba, I suppose, gives it away. And, when I was first asked to talk today, I kind of was trying to dissect how it was that I could approach this conversation in kind of a unique way. And what came to mind was when I thought about the title of how is media responding to COVID-19 and covering it, I thought that, whenever we think about media, there tends to be a focus purely on news media, which is great. News media is important. That's where we get information from traditionally and so forth. But I would like to think of this perhaps from a broader perspective, and perhaps more from a holistic perspective. So, for example, when one thinks about media in its most basic form, for what do you think the music industry is doing? There are questions about this, and how can the music industry be roped in and given the opportunity to be able to come up with ideas, to engage with the conversation? And I use the music industry as an example because when you consider the fact that in most African countries, you've got a youth population that's way over 50%, going into over 60% in certain regions, the music industry and people within that sector have really been able to capture the hearts and imaginations of young people. And we need to get them involved in the conversation and find a way of how it is that they're able to target and get information through to people who perhaps think of COVID from a mind perspective versus a heart perspective. So I thought that this was quite a unique way of doing it. There's also, of course, traditional TV and radio programming, and my colleagues have given excellent points already with regards to specific news journalism and social media and so forth. But I do think that when we think about radio and TV, there are ways that TV programming can impact and push forward conversations when it comes to what's going on with COVID. I'm somebody who's old enough to remember when everything happened with regards to HIV/AIDS, and there was this big conversation happening around the world, and how media and soap operas and so forth really started to engage those conversations and themes within storylines. So, for example, when you think about COVID-19, because as we've heard, it's probably going to be with us for the next 2 years or so. How is it that we incorporate it in a TV program? So if hypothetically there's a TV show that's focused on mothers and parenting and families, a topic that we could touch on, for example, would be something along the lines of how does one deal with a young person who's perhaps dealing with mental health issues? How do you, or as a mother or the father, how do you balance being somebody who's going to be teaching your children while they're at home, running a home, and also working from home? So just things so that people start to engage and to understand, okay, everybody's dealing with the same thing. We're having this on talk shows as part of a greater conversation. With regards to radio, radio is obviously one of the biggest mediums that we have in the continent holistically, and in Uganda it's also really huge in my home country. And one of the things that I really think about with radio is that it has the ability to hit people in the rural areas, and this is really key. Just being in Ghana, I heard a really sad story that was picked up by one of the radio stations here on their website, and they spoke about a young girl who her mom had COVID-19. The mom recovered from COVID-19, but when she was walking down the streets, once the people had found out, and this was in one of the outskirts, sort of rural areas, once they had found out that the mom had COVID-19, she was being victimized, and this raises the question and the challenge around the stigmatization around COVID-19. So one of the ways, for example, that we can counter this using radio programming is if there are radio dramas, in rural areas, if there's a commissioning of a radio drama where stories are being told about people going about with their lives, but then incorporating the narrative of what COVID-19 really is, what it does, what it doesn't do, and how it is that you're able to, in your daily life, be able to move about doing what you're doing, observe the rules and regulations that have been given, but also be able to also be able to fully understand what COVID-19 is. I feel for me that with radio and TV programming that's engaging, that's traditional kind of water cooler conversations, it really has a way of impacting people and getting them to understand COVID-19 pandemic and how it is that we all survive in a term that we've all heard, which is the new world, or the new normal, if I should say that. So those are some things I thought. I think that one of the key things is, with regards to this, is because we need to break stigmatization. The reason why we need to is because there needs to be a huge emphasis put through in creative ways about how about how it is that how we understand COVID-19 as being a community issue. It's not a one-person individual, because unfortunately, the way that the pandemic has gone, and we're all testament of that, being stuck in different countries or not being able to move, our life being interrupted and disrupted. What happens to our neighbor now, literally more so than in any other time in the world, impacts us directly. It impacts our economies. It impacts how we go to school or don't go to school. It impacts the medical sector. It impacts everybody. So there needs to be a huge emphasis put on the fact that, look, COVID-19 is a community issue, and the creative sectors need to be driven in through radio programming and TV programming for people to understand that it's more about community health than just individual health. Because in the same way that we wear masks to protect ourselves and to protect others, well, we wear masks, to protect others, and others wear masks to protect ourselves. So, it needs to be able to push that sort of conversation. In terms of the creative sector, I think that there's also ideas that I have in my mind of how this can really be instrumental. Now, when you consider the fashion industry for a bit, and if you would indulge me with this, I think that I've heard a quote before about how fashion has the ability to really tell a story of what is going on in a particular time and period, and so when you think about fashion, like now, for example, masks have really played a huge role, because number one, they protect us, which is very important. And then number two, they've also given people the ability to have their own creative expressions and show who it is that they are as people. And I think that if we expand that, if COVID is going to be with us for 2 to 3 years and so forth, and there is a conversation around how people are going to be able to make money and everything, there is the option perhaps of having T-shirts made and slogans commissioned by designers in our own countries, and them putting slogans on. This helps again with destigmatization. It also helps to kind of put a little bit of money into those sectors and so forth. And then comedy, if you're like me, I often am on the receiving end of links, for comedians, and I feel as though Ugandan comedians, pardon me, are the best that they are. And so, for example, if there is a comedian, if comedians are commissioned to kind of tell the story of COVID-19, but in a lighthearted way, there's a way that this can become almost viral, and the information can be disseminated to different audiences in kind of an amazing way. So if you consider the fact somebody like Kansime Ann, who is from Uganda, of course, and she's literally all around the world, people know her, and it was a lot because of what she was doing on YouTube. But we need to find a way, because we have WhatsApp and all of that, of how do we engage the comedians and comedic content creators and help them to disseminate information to audiences in a different lighthearted way, but something that is also very important. I do think that the options are endless, and when it comes to the creative industry. But with that said, I feel as though, I was having a conversation with somebody, and we were really talking about how, and this has been obviously a talking point for many people, about how the medical staff have really been at the front line of what's been going on with COVID. And that's been what the conversation is. It's really saddening to hear about newspapers shutting, about media houses having to close down or down staff and everything, but that's happening in all different sectors, unfortunately, around the world. But when you think about it, if your country was ever in lockdown, or if you were in a place where your life suddenly changed and all you had to do was to kind of sit at home and find your way about, how would you have gone through that without something creative happening in your life, without being able to read a book, to read a newspaper, to go online, to watch TV? When you think about all that, I feel as though to all the journalists who have been going out there bravely, sometimes perhaps or without PPE, because they've not been considered as perhaps first responders or like a vital front line, should I say, with regards to COVID, but their communication and what it is, the information that they're giving us is very important. So I think we need to think of it from that perspective. Media, creative and media as a whole is not just something that's a nice to have. It's something that is very important. It's an expression of who it is that we are. And it's something that's going to document this particular time in history that we hopefully will get through as a community. But more than that, it's also going to be a point of being able to encourage, to disseminate information, to destigmatize, and to ensure that we all get to the other side of COVID together as a community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ali. Appreciate it. And of course, we just want to give you this honors because you're our guest speaker for today. So guys, ladies and gentlemen, please let's clap to a guest speaker as well and just appreciate her for her time. So I see most of you. Thank you, Dr. Mayaki. I see you there. Asante. So at this point, it's and I'm happy that you actually brought it out on the side of the traditional media in view of the new media as well. Something that I did not think about and which makes a lot of sense was the place of fashion and comedy. I think it also draws in from your background, especially in the arts. So over to Pauline, and I know Madam Leslie mentioned about Anne Kansime. I want to throw in Eric Omondi with what he has actually been doing. I see a sense you're out into laughter. So you actually watch Eric Omondi, So Pauline.
Yes, I.
Which is very good. Yeah. What do you think about his content? I mean, it's comedy.
No, I think his content. I think his content and comedy is amazing. I'm just very protective of Kansime, and to be very honest, as a woman and as a Ugandan, I'm bearing the flag for her. No, but jokes aside, I feel as though comedy in East Africa holistically, Kenya and Uganda tend to do really well with comedy. I'm just being, I'm just being supportive of Anne.
Makes sense. So anyway, we'll have that vote on who's the president of comedy in Africa, be it Anne Kansime or Eric Omondi. We'll see how that one goes. But Pauline, this has been really mind-boggling in the sense that we're always used to acreage on newspapers, write your story that make sure it's about 800 words. We're always on TV, you have a 1-hour bulletin, but for just 1 minute, Eric Omondi perhaps would share a video, Anne Kansime will share a video on Instagram and maybe gain views that perhaps might not be likened to what media houses are doing. Basically, use of Instagram, a platform that perhaps so many journalists will be akin to or will consider it social. Just talking about the new media, just drawing in from what our guest speaker has said. What are some of your perspectives, especially here in Kenya, and what comes to mind when you look at these non-conventional ways of how we communicate as journalists?
Cliff, about digital media or new media, as you'd call it, Julius from Rwanda has said that most people are still stuck on the traditional media. But that is changing with time, and especially in Kenya, social media is big. And most young people seem to be a bit disengaged with the mainstream media and are shifting more and more of their conversations and their engagements to digital media. And talking of the comedians, as you've said, most of their products are posted on Instagram and Facebook also. I see a lot of Eric Omondi on Facebook and a lot of him on Instagram. So these are some of the platforms that are being used by creative arts, people in the creative arts and other industries to pass their message, especially now, because movement even to media houses has become a big problem, a bit challenging. And I'll mostly dwell on that issue of social media. And there's a downside to social media, especially during this time of COVID-19. There's been a lot of misinformation. There's been a lot of fake news that is spreading over through social media. But at the same time, a lot of good is happening through the same platforms. When it comes to dissemination of information, even from governments, there's a lot of engagement on social media because of the instant nature of social media. for example, if a case is reported at a certain place, the people in charge, the authorities are able to move in fast because that is something that can be reported and people can engage on it and conversations can be had around the issue. And so it activates an instant reaction. And also, when it comes to education, to education and informing the masses, creating awareness, social media has been very critical because it's very easy to share graphics. It's very easy to share short videos that are just educating the masses on how to washing their hands, keeping social distance, wearing masks. On TV, maybe this will just be reported as an ad. This will just be an ad, maybe before news time or in between programming. But on social media, this is something that is always constantly ongoing. And the ministries of health, the health ministries around the world, a World Health Organization, and other, and other players are able to use their platforms throughout to keep informing the masses on this and giving these very important messages through graphics and videos. There was the issue of musicians, and we've seen a lot of musicians use Facebook platforms to live concerts. We've seen DJs having Facebook live sessions. And so they are still able to continue with their, they're still able to find a platform which they may not necessarily find on television. Right now, they may not be able to hold concerts, but through social media platforms, they are still able to keep up and do their thing. Again, I've said feedback to government. The masses are able to report to government what is going on, maybe in their area through these social media platforms. And so also we've seen a lot of hashtags around this period, a lot of hashtags mobilizing for causes, a lot of hashtags calling for humanitarian aid, calling out for the public to assist people who may be stranded or people who are lacking food at this particular time. Hashtags to just enlighten the masses on how to take care of themselves and to take personal responsibilities. So I believe social media has become very critical during this period to engage, to educate, to inform, to create awareness, and to give platforms to those people who were generally using, using other platforms before COVID came, but that due to lockdown and containment measures, they cannot continue with those conventional means. And so they have to rethink, they have to find new platforms, they have to find new ways of doing things. And social media provides just that.
Thank you, Pauline. Appreciate it. When you mentioned about social media, I also want to just talk about creative spaces. And in view of where I'm at, you'll know, they can see the background there. It's a Baraza Media Lab. Of course, due to the crisis right now, there's been a lot of restrictions in terms of movement, but we've had the launch of such a lab that offers a space for journalists, creatives, artists to just come together. Baraza is a Swahili word for meaning just basically a congregation or a gathering to share ideas. And of course, it's been a good opportunity to actually rethink. And personally, I should say, I'm trying also think about an idea about podcasting as the new way of communicating, that, you don't have to be on air, perhaps wherever you are in your pajamas, and you can easily just talk about, what is coming out to you, especially as a journalist. So I see great opportunities, great innovations, great spaces, creative spaces for journalists, especially in just trying to really get ahead. Denise, it's over to you to just kind of chime into the conversation. Do you feel that we are on the right side of history, and are we communicating, are we telling our story in the right way possible in this day and age?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. As you said, I'm Denise. I work for Radio TV in Rwanda. So first of all, like here in Rwanda, the coronavirus has arrived in March this year. It was shocking to hear that there was the first case here in the country. And also our government was quick to come up with different measures just to deal with it. So as a journalist or a communicator, it was a great connection just to continue working in such a situation where you could be infected, but also there was no job to be stopped. And just because that time, people were very much in need of us just to hear the news and still needs it. And my mate, Mr. Julius, has talked about the effect of coronavirus here in Rwanda, especially the country which is in East Africa. You know, there are so many things, but one of the most used methods here in media houses, where, for example, where I work for, is to use the technology. I mean, in the preparation of news information, you know, we say that we have to use the video calls, use the voice calls, even though it's not easy for everyone or everywhere, or anyone who can talk to us based on the internet issues. But it is one of the methods that we have used, and it has really answered. And also going to the field to look for the information, to look for the news. It was not easy, especially at the beginning. So just because there are some people who were running away from us, otherwise we can also be infected, and also our family, they're afraid that we can bring them the coronavirus. So it is as good as visiting as one of the coronavirus care center. So now a journalist or media house, it's not even easy financially. Julius has talked about it. But also there was the opportunity that journalists used to saw, including training, other things. You see, for these days, it's very challenging. But more than that, a journalist is also one of the high risk of being infected, as I said before. So there are many more, but the important thing is to work hard, to continue to provide constructive information, and also to keep our country or countries to continue to deal with this global threat. So let us work together to combat this epidemic. But I also once again thank ADA NEPAD for this meeting, because it helped us to share ideas, the experience, how we can deal with it. You know, when you talk with the people in Kenya, Tanzania, you know, everywhere, it's helpful. But above that, what I can say also is to, as journalists, as communicator, let us also help our government to achieve the goals, like also the Agenda 2063. Every year there is the point which must be achieved. So let's help them to fight against coronavirus in our way, how we can be able to do that in every way where we can be able to do this. But also, let's also remember about the Agenda 2063. Remember to help, if it's to help our government or to do what, let's do our best just to make sure we achieve also the goal that we have set. Let's not be focused only on the coronavirus, but also let's find the new way to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Appreciate it. I was muted a bit there, but I'm only glad that you can actually even call for collaboration. As somebody who is, of course, on a consultative role right now in government, I should say, having been in the newsroom and now in government, that word collaboration and partnership somewhat is it's always very blurry, because most people say, you know what, it's us against them. So there isn't, you know, there's always a push and pull for that matter. So you saying that, you know, journalists also have a place to play in assisting governments relay information. I think it's a good place to begin with in terms of us enhancing that collaboration and the networking. I shouted as well to Aude NEPAD as well for the collaboration with the various networks of journalists. I know we have Grass, of course, as the president of the Agricultural Journalists for Africa, which is also a good insight onto that case. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being with us at this call. We are just a few minutes past the last hour we have. And now it's a time for just a bit of an engagement session. So please, I'm going to ask us all to please use the question and answer platform to raise your questions. I'm just going to read through them as we just direct them to our various speakers. But at this point in time, allow me now to just bring back our CEO, our leader, Dr. Mayaki, to come back on and just maybe to just get an insight from him, having listened to the journalist, to our guest speaker, and of course to the various other policy players on the call. What comes to mind, and what would you say, and where do we stand as journalists at this point in time? So, Dr. Mayaki, just want to get your few thoughts as we open it up for a plenary. And there's also a question here from one of the journalists who says, we've seen the EU supporting media houses in this time of crisis for them not to fire journalists. So maybe is there a package that Auda Nepad is giving to media houses to enable them stay afloat? Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm not supposed to speak a lot, so I'll be very short and focus on 5 key issues which I heard. The first issue which I heard, which is important, is creativity, creative spaces, and just use the media in a creative way, and moving towards arts, culture, comedy, etc. I think it's an important point from someone like myself who is not a media specialist. The second issue which I heard was the complementarity between traditional media and digital media. And I think it's important. And I was looking at the chat, and someone rightly said that radio is still the main media which is listened to in rural areas. The third issue which I heard was about networks, media networks, necessity of collaboration in order to be able to disseminate proper information. By proper information, I mean useful information. And the fourth point which was raised, which I think is important from my point of view, is the sharing dimension. How can this concept of sharing be broken down in a pragmatic manner in order to connect all these media actors and stakeholders, because it would give strength to their voice in the current context in which we live. So about the question, as you know, most of the efforts of the African Union today are dedicated to fighting the disease and stopping the spread of the disease. And that's why a COVID fund was created at the African Union level. And this COVID fund, which is directly linked to the Africa CDC, has a responsibility in terms of communication. So I think we should explore this idea. We shouldn't just respond by saying that, you know, resources are shrinking, so the EU can do it and the AU cannot do it. No, I think we should grasp that idea, explore it, and see how practically it can be implemented, how it can be designed first and implemented afterwards. And I count on our interaction to explore this idea further and not just leave it on the side of the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mayaki. I'm just trying to restart my video, I think, from that end. Maybe our Super. But anyway, I think you can all hear me. Just don't worry about the videos. We have it sorted out. Thank you, Dr. Mayaki. And you say that it's an idea that we should actually try and explore further in the sense that we can actually support media houses and just going into that effort about, creating that collaboration and not saying, hey, media houses are struggling. And of course, as an Auda Nepad, we can't do anything about it. It really excites me to hear you say that it's something that you're willing to consider. I think one of the key takeaways from this is just to see how, as journalists network, especially now from the different regions, we can just come together and see, well, what can be done to sustain the livelihoods of journalists who are fast losing their jobs, and of course work together. Ladies and gentlemen, I just now want to throw it over now to the Q&A session. I think that question by, I forgot who had raised it earlier, but I think that has been well articulated by Dr. Mayaki. That was by Phil Malone. Phil, thank you so much for that. So that has been answered. I also want to welcome those of us who are listening in through the interpretation side, through French. Feel free to also raise in your questions and we'll be able to sample them as well. So let me just go back to what Mwanja posted, that in view of this crisis that we're having, and somebody mentioned that in Africa, indeed, there is always that calling for problem solving. Not saying that it's all doom and gloom, but it's that we are likened towards the capabilities of Africans in terms of dealing with a crisis and coming out stronger than ever before. Yes, we have COVID. We have a financial crisis that will stay with us for a while. We have the locust invasion, say, for instance, in East Africa. We have concerns about political leadership, and especially when Angel mentions that it's an election period in Tanzania. Grass mentioned that it's also going to be an election period in Uganda. So a lot of things to deal with. So just trying to get out of this murky situation. I think I'm going to throw it out to any speaker who's going to talk to us about that in terms of just creating the balance and how to really get out of the crisis and sustain ourselves. So somebody, Paida asks, way forward is not coming out clearly from the panelists. So that's what we're actually going to tackle now for the next 20 minutes. So thanks, Paida, for that. Now it's just going to be about a way forward. YouTube is a big data consumer. How do you offer facilities in our African cities and rural areas? Okay. And also the bit about most newspapers rely on websites, not on printed versions. I think, Phil, that was just a comment you made there. Lilian Kambirigi, sorry, let me just say that. Lilian Kambirigi, you ask, what support do we give to our schools of journalism in expanding quality digital reporting? Not everybody can be a journalist, rightfully so, and we have a lot about citizen journalism. So Lilian asks, what support can we give to the schools to enhance their training? Then I'm going to take the last one from Paul, which he says that the lack of inclusive media reporting has denied persons with different impairments the right to access information. And there's also the tendency of tribalism attitude being reported, and the media is silent on this. What can journalists do to improve the circumstance? Quite long there, but maybe I could just paraphrase. You asked that, it's not really been fair. So reporting hasn't really been fair. And there's also the tendency of approach through tribalism. So thanks, Paul, for that. I don't know, Leslie, can I bring you back in to just maybe chime in and give your thoughts on this? Lee, are you there? If not, then I'm just going to throw it to Mwanja. I don't know if you want to now bring it. Yeah, it's also be good to hear from Mwanja. I know you're in the background there, but in the view about the crisis, like how do we navigate through the crisis? There's a lot to deal with, but how do we kind of create the balance? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Laban, Cliff, and thank you, colleagues, and all our participants this afternoon. The session has been very, very engaging, and I'm also trying to follow the chat and the questions raised. What I can say from the onset is that having conversations such as this one that we're having today, it's in essence, we're all trying to navigate our way in the new world, in the new way of doing things under COVID-19. So as Dr. Mayaki said, we cannot say that experts have the answer. And therefore, our role in the development sector is to listen more to what's happening on the ground. And a platform such as this one then provides us with the key lessons and experiences that we're able to draw from the different regions. I don't think there's any solution, one size fits all solution that can be applied across the board. And yes, the waters are still murky, as we all say, and as we've heard from the conversations. The digital spaces, it's not everybody who's got access to internet. I think internet penetration in Africa is still below 60% as we speak. Therefore, we've got a huge component of our populations that are missing out and are not able to engage with us in the digital spaces. But I think I heard something very creative, but I'm not too sure, but I think it was from Uganda, from Grace in Uganda, who said, who gave an example of extension workers to say, yes, rural areas might not have easy access to the internet and digital platforms, but then they're able to download some of the content from extension workers, that is in the agricultural sector. They're able to download some of the messages that are passed on YouTube and these other platforms. They download them, save them, and then they pass them on to their communities when they go now into the rural spaces. So those are some of the innovative ways that we can go about it. We can go about bridging the gap while we're waiting for the whole continent to be in the digital and internet spaces. And then also heard about the importance of radio from Lee Kasumba, who said that radio is also key. As we all know, it still reaches the masses out there in the rural areas, and it helps to bridge the divide. So we can use, let's use what we have. My personal take would be to say, let's use what we have. There's radio, we can dramatize messages and using the creative arts as well, while we're waiting for everybody to be on the internet and in the digital spaces. There are a lot of tools that we have at our disposal as Africans. The creative arts, that's a space that we all have. Dramatizing messages, that's a space that we all have. So I think we're still trying to navigate the waters, and solutions are being found and tested through having engagements and conversations such as this. They help us in shaping what it is that we want, in shaping the interventions that we have. Because like we all know, there's no one size fits all solution. So having engagements such as this is a huge leap in hearing what's happening on the ground. And as Africa, yes, we've got our Africa CDC and the African Union and ourselves, where we're able to gain more knowledge and more information on the COVID responses that are there on the ground, as well as timely information as well. Thank you very much. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, Wanja. Thank you very much. I was beginning to get worried that you're giving your final remarks, but we still want to hear from you at the tail end of this. So still stay with us. I want to now bring in Techno. Come on, Techno, come on, comes to us from Niger. I know we had a great representation from journalists in East Africa, but it's good to hear that somebody in the Western side is tuned in. So Techno, I'm just going to ask you to unmute yourself and give your contribution at this time. I don't seem to reach him, but let me cross over to William Makora. He says, the innovation is trendy, quite in tandem with the prevailing media technology. We ought to work together to make it superb experience. That's for the effective communication, information, and communication technology is also very important in exploitation of media and journalism, especially in creativity, is made to be appreciated. Now, the world is a home where information is available and information is power. Thank you, William Makora. I consider it a comment, so will not pose it to anyone. Lillian Kambirigi, you agree with Dr. Mayaki on the bit about resources. There's also about the issue about the arts, trying to really adopt the arts in disseminating information about COVID as much as it's technical, also just trying to make it a bit palatable for our audience as well. Hope Faranga says we have to be careful with social media because people have the liberty to publish anything without gatekeeping measures, which can put the population at risk of consuming information that is not verified and accurate. Thank you, Hope. That's from Uganda. Thank you. Would consider it a comment as well. A bit about misinformation and the elephant in the room, which is fake news, and just really how to tackle fake news, especially even as we communicate online as well. So I think I'm done from the bit about the chat box, and also the bit that Marion, over to you. You say you'd like to respond to the question on training. It's high time that training institutions revamped or overhauled the training curricula so as to capture the digital innovations as well as the graduates to be ready for the industry. Marion Amukuzi, I kindly want you to expound more on this because it's also a pet subject. I mean, we're also mentors to the future generation of journalists, and them seeing the layoffs, them seeing the crisis that is happening, them seeing the disruptions. How can they also reinvent themselves, even as they study now, to be relevant in the future? So Marion, over to you.
Apologies, moderator. I think we're not able to get the participants to hear their voice. They might be muted. If they are not registered as panelists, it will be difficult for us to get audio.
Not to worry. But just to also confirm, sorry, Mary, we can't get your audio as well, but thank you for your remarks onto this. So let me ask any one of the panelists who would like to chime in on this training. I don't know if I can throw it out to Angel. I don't know what you'll actually say about this, because I know also thanks to various corporations and thanks to AU out in Nepal as well, through the various trainings that we've had across the continent, what would you say is the place for especially journalists who are working right now to also kind of mentor and train the next generation? I don't seem to get a response from Angel. Denise, okay. Go ahead. All right. Angel, are you on? Okay, Denise, do you want to comment on anything about training the next generation of journalists on new media? Okay.
Hello.
Grace. Okay, go ahead.
Actually, mine is about something to do with fake news. But if you, on the comment about the trainings and capacity building, this has been happening over years, but still there's a gap missing because, for example, the Africa Agriculture Journalists Network has set out to make sure that they have country chapters. And once we have systems in place where you have the country chapters being able to recruit, to get members on board and nurture young journalists from in-country, that would be the beginning point. That still it goes back to building networks. However, in my thinking, COVID has really, despite it being a pandemic, it has created an great opportunity for us to place media where it deserves to be. In my thinking is that we just need to put some frameworks in place. And again, like I said, to bridge this gap where there is an information gap happening, we need editors and the media and the journalists in the same place in order to have information flow that is harmonized and streamlined, and to try and rule out gaps for fake news. So just that is for editors to ensure that there's a central clearinghouse and also they are at the same level with the media. The issue about Lillian raised a very pertinent issue about training of journalists in the training institutions. Again, despite even when we want to scale out a curriculum for African journalists, for example, there is the liberalization of education in many countries, or institutions crop up every day in every corner in my country. So, and there's no way the Ministry of Education or any authority is tracking what they are disseminating and how they are raising all these young people that are graduating annually with certificates, diplomas. So it all goes back to the national government and the frameworks in place to ensure that the curriculum is uniform for all institutions, and also to say that private sector can come in to support government to develop a better curriculum. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic, Grace. Thank you also for just jumping in view of that. And then speaking from an editorial perspective, there's also the need towards creating that bit about the, sort of internships. So you find that collaborations between the media houses and academia. So as much as we are also encouraging the lecturers and the teachers to train on digital journalism, there's also the bit about practicality and also opening your doors for journalists to come in and also try their hand on an industry perspective. Of course, contributing to that bit about saying that, graduates are half-baked and they don't quite fit into the job market. I think that will be really well-founded onto it. So at this point, I'm just looking at, again, the questions that have been raised as you go on. So we've done a bit about the training bit. We've done a bit from research. It's clear that most teachers are still training. Okay, no, we're done with that from Marion. So at this point as well, I just don't know if Julius, I'm just going to throw it out to Julius as well, because we've had a perspective from Grace, Julius or Denise from Rwanda, because I just want to bring in a bit of a richer representation from the region. So Julius, over to you. And I think a key pertinent question would be creating open-ended platforms. We've had platforms such as the Facebook journalism project, for instance, where, when you talk about creativity, you can actually use social media to enhance your stories and just use platforms such as Facebook. And of course, Facebook here, I mean Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, because they're all under one organization. There is a media house in South Africa. If I could just get the name right now, I need to, yes, it's called the Continent. I don't know if it's called the Continent with Mail and Guardian. The Continent has resorted to WhatsApp as a distribution model to actually reach out to the audience, and I think it's something that is very creative. If I could just maybe show my phone out there, it's a PDF document that you can actually just scroll through every morning. It's not quite clear, but I think you can see just trying to use mobile and use online content to reach out to the audience. So Julius, I don't know if it's a good opportunity to bring you up here to talk about these technological giants and how journalists can use those platforms to share their content.
Okay. I think I seem to be mute. My video seems to be muted. It's okay. I will just go on. I think it's from the organizers. Well, okay. It's on. It's back on. Thank you, Laban. Technology really is very important. It's very important in the sense that it gives us a lot of possibilities to do things that sometimes you can never be able to do either instantly or in a very quicker way. For instance, right now, when you look at media houses that have been able to tap into technology, you find that they're able to know what kind of consumers they're dealing with, the kind of news consumers, content consumers they're dealing with. You're able to use all these tech tools like Google Analytics, for instance, to understand the behaviors of your consumers, to understand what is it that they're interested, which is different from what we were doing before, because it was a kind of assumption. If you were running a newspaper, you didn't know exactly the kind of consumers you were dealing with. But today you're able to understand, are consumers interested in politics? Are they interested in science? Are they interested in, I don't know, anything else? And now talk about the social media or social networking sites, the likes of in Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp. You come to realize that these platforms are also new possibilities for media owners or publishers to even distribute their content in a much faster way to people who may need it. So that is why you realize now media houses are using the likes of Twitter to appeal to even advertisers, because you're able to understand that when I post your ad on Twitter, you're able to see how people have interacted with your video. You're able to understand how many people this ad has reached, how many people have commented on this ad. So it is really something that shouldn't be overlooked, because it comes with a whole lot of possibilities, brings a whole lot of possibilities that media managers and owners can leverage going forward. And I think it's something that we need to be keen about. All we need to do is basically try as much as possible to train people, either be journalists or even the people we work with within our organization, understand that today you don't need to wait. When you go to the field, you don't need to wait to come back to the office for you to send a story, because before you reach the office, already everybody will have known what has already taken place. So it's good to to leverage all these platforms. For instance, leverage the collaboration platforms that are out there, the likes of Trello, to be able to give information in a much faster way. And I think that is the kind of beauty about technology, and if we shouldn't look at it as really a threat in a nutshell, but we should look at technology as an opportunity. I think that's what I have to say.
Mr. Moderator, you're muted.
My apologies. My apologies. Julius, I was just agreeing with you and just saying that this technology is actually free, and it's a good opportunity as journalists who understand the media ethos to leverage and, of course, help fight the misinformation and fake news that exists out there. I'm just going to give it up to two ladies to just give kind of their remarks and what they have actually gotten out of this. Pauline, I know you've been very active on this space when talking about the digital space and talking about that. So I just want to give it up to you, maybe just for about 15, 30 seconds to maybe say what comes onto mind and what you see as a way forward as we draw this to a landing.
Laban, someone has said that social media, and I think one of the participants has contributed, that social media and mainstream media and traditional media should complement each other, and I agree. At this point in time, we need all hands on deck. We need to use all the platforms that we have to educate the masses, to give the information that people need to have out there. And both these platforms are very important. As I've said before, social media is good because it's instant and it provides it provides a place for engagement. It provides a place for people to have a discourse and be able to share information. But on the other side, traditional media is, also takes away it's able to clarify issues. It's a more credible platform, because social media, again, as we keep saying, it can be problematic when it comes to relaying fake information. There's no time to authenticate, so everything is thrown out there. But also, so now mainstream media provides that place to authenticate, to give credible information, authoritative information. So at this point in time, those two platforms are very important, and they're there to complement each other. And as people, those of us in the media, those of us maybe in IGOs like the AUDA, NEPA, those of us in governmental institutions, need to take full advantage of these platforms. And I'm glad that, for example, the Kenyan media has given a lot of free airtime for government to put out adverts, that will create awareness, and has been engaging doctors and people in different sectors, and giving them just that opportunity to talk to the public. Social media also, most influencers have come out to use their platforms that have maybe many followings, with musicians, artists, and even journalists who are on social media. They are taking, they're using their platforms to pass information on COVID-19, and which has been very, very commendable. So I think the collaboration between those two platforms has been of great importance.
Thank you. Angel, are you there? Thank you, Pauline. I really appreciate. Angel? Okay.
Hello?
All right, there you are. Please, just closing remarks as we bring this to a close. From where you sit, where do we go from here?
Okay, what I can say is that in the media, as Dr. Mayaki has mentioned earlier, that we need to be creative. And when I was listening, when you are talking that AU has supported media in Kenya. So here in Tanzania, we didn't have that kind of a support. That is where, as it came to us, that for media, we have to be creative, and how we also have to do something like multi-purpose, not just being a journalist, but also in another way, we are practicing on how you can contribute revenue to the company, so that in terms of crisis, the companies won't be a victim. That is what has been happening here in Tanzania. The journalists are not just journalists, but they also do the marketing, and they also do the advertising to make sure that we all contribute to a company. So in a way that sometimes, when it comes to funds with other partners, or let's say the government, we avoid the issue of favoring, for example, like the issue of making sure that you cannot publish any negative story about a certain partner simply because they are one of your funders or one of your partners. So we are moving from that, and it's with the current crisis that has happened in Tanzania, it has put us in that way that we cannot just depend on issues of revenue on one side, let's say advertising only on print media, but how do we create other areas to make sure that we get revenue in all sources, and how do we make sure that even the content itself, it can sell without even having sometimes the advertising. That's what I can say.
Thank you, Angel. Lee, I don't know, we've touched on a bit about creativity, touched on a bit about new media, touched on a bit about where do you see Africa as a continent going forward. From where you sit, let's also speak about the place of Auda Nepad and kind of enhancing that collaboration with the journalists. Over to you for a brief closing remarks.
I think for me, in terms of what I would like to contribute with closing remarks, is that, I feel that we have a huge opportunity at the moment. When I think about communication, which is in essence what media is, which is in essence what journalists do, what people in the creative speakers do. Somebody has a message, they have a platform, they have a transmitter and a way to send that message out. And then in order for the message to be successful, there has to be a check where it's like message received. We have populations across East Africa that are multi-layered. People live their lives kind of differently, depending on how old you are, if you have a family, if you don't, depending on what your personal interests are, it will depend on where it is that you're going to be able to get that information and the correct media. COVID-19 is a public health crisis, as we all know, but it's also, in our context, let's use the word community problem. And what we need to do is to touch and speak to different people within the community, and find out if an artist, for example, like Diamond Platinum, is able to get X amount of people to hear him. What is it that he's doing right? And how can we use what he does in his own creative way and say, Diamond, this is the information we want to send out. These are the people we need to reach it out to. We want to commission you to be able to tell this story. Can you do it in a way that your audience is going to understand it? But it comes through a collaborative, example. If a comedian is used in the same way, commissioning people to do the work, and if there's a proper collaboration between government, policymakers, scientists, and they really engage people, they engage journalists, and they engage them, and they ensure that this is the information that we need to send out. We need to be able to send information out in multi-layered ways. We can't take for granted that majority of people, unfortunately, are always going to be tuned into news media. I personally love news media, but I don't know if my sister, for example, is somebody who would engage with news media as much as me versus other sorts of media or mediums. And we need to be able to tackle and to hit all parts of society, which is why at the start of my conversation, I said we needed to look at a broader view of how it is that we see media. And in this particular instance, it's about important message, transmission, message received, and ensuring that each and every person, whether you're watching news media, whether you're on social media, whether it's through your artist, whether it's through fashion, whatever it may be, whether it's through a comedy skit that's going to come to you, as long as there's a collaboration and people in the media space, journalists and creative media people alike, are brought into the conversation and are briefed properly, they will be able to disseminate the right information in the right way that the message will be received, and hopefully we can get on the other side of this.
Wow, thank you very much, Leslie. A very good place to end it at. I think great insights that are shared. I think as East African journalist, what I'm hopeful and what I can actually see is there's a passion towards, okay, this is where we're at. Then that's where we want to go, and what can we really do about it? And this discourse is just but an example of what is to come. Yes, we are in a crisis, but we can also see there's an opportunity for growth. There's an opportunity to enhance our reporting and be at the very best. Just before, of course, I close this to I wrap this up. I just now want to bring back Mwanja to give her perspective, and of course, returning where the webinar should rightfully be. That's at Audane Pod. So Mwanja will give her perspective, and after which I'll close the meeting. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much. The conversation this afternoon has been very, very engaging, and we've learned quite a lot from the East African region, and we look forward to our next webinar, which will be for the media in Central Africa. I just want to acknowledge a few people that I saw joined in this afternoon. We've got Mr. Simon Peter Owaka from EAC. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the microphone working because he joined as an attendee, but he would have loved to give his perspectives as well. Our apologies, Mr. Simon Peter. We hope to engage with you in our next webinar. And I also see that there are people that joined us today, like Albert Nkundane, and you'll be happy to learn, Lee, that Mr. Albert has been with us for a very long time in bringing in the arts. I think he's a poet, so he always has poems for us in the development sector, and he delivers them very, very well. I also want to acknowledge colleagues like Vivian Kandirigi, as well as colleagues from the Nigeria office. I see that they've joined us as well, and we've got members of our media networks, the Agenda 2063 Media Network, as well as the CADAC Journalist Network, and we've got colleagues from the UN and the AU as well. And we had our Goodwill Ambassador, Mr. Clifford Spencer, joining us all the way from the UK. And everybody that joined in this afternoon, thank you very much. We appreciate that you joined us, and we had a very, very engaging session. For me, I'll just say some of the pointers that I got from the meeting this afternoon. I'll start with the CEO, Dr. Mayaki, who said that it's important that we must listen to what the media have to say and listen humbly, because even us in the development space, we don't necessarily have all the answers. There's no expert on COVID-19 as far as we're concerned. Therefore, it's important to listen. to the media as well, because media, they're on the front line of what's happening when it comes to relaying messages from the development experts as well as messages from the community and vice versa. And then Julius as well touched on the danger of social media in terms of misinformation. Yes, some of my kids actually show me a lot of misinformation with regards to COVID-19. My child said to me today that there's a cure for COVID-19 that's found in the antibodies of the llama. So such things we need to counter against them. But that's where now I think it's Angel who came in and said the traditional media will always be there, because people now, when they get misinformation on social media, they always run back to traditional media to find if the information is true, to verify if the information from social media is actually true. So there's still a role and a huge part for traditional media to play. And without taking too much of your time, I think I would like to say thank you to everybody for joining in, the NEPAD team and our colleagues and our friends out there. I'll end with this, unless the CEO has got the 1 minute departing word for us. Thank you.
Dr. Mayaki?
No, Mwanja summed it up wonderfully. As a moderator, you did a fantastic job. And our role, as I said, was to listen. And we listened to very rich ideas, very precise contributions, and we'll work on them and come back to you. This does not have to be and shouldn't be just a one-shot interaction. It has to be more regular. Thank you. And thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maki. Thank you very much to the entire team at NEPAD for organizing such an interactive session. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you also to our participants as well, both on Zoom and on social media as well. It's been an honor and a pleasure. The discussion continues. It is the Africa we want. We have to tell our own stories. We also have to share a lot on the African narrative, and it behooves us as journalists to be at the forefront of this. I've been your moderator. My name is Laban. I look forward to meeting you again in all our network, and of course, interacting, sharing ideas, and of course, being at the cutting edge of technology. Thank you very much, and see you again next time. You can all do a wave and say goodbye. Bye-bye.